This is not theological discussion, and I think I've given up on apologia versus atheism because I could not get a lot of people for that show. So instead, this is a Sunday edition of Talking Religion, Morality, and Philosophy. This time, we have Bert Poole in the deal with us. Bert Poole in the religion pool today, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
All right.
How are you all? Yes.
All right, so
I'm just trying to share our discussion on my feed so we can get some people checking it out.
I'll give you the link right now if you want to share the watch link with people.
Sure.
All right, so while we do that, let's get a topic started. Tell us about yourself, Bert.
So I've introed a couple of places. I had a Thirsty Theist where I went kind of pretty thoroughly through my past. I was raised a Catholic, probably around my freshman year in college. That was more of a kind of a cultural thing. I wasn't terribly into it, although I was an altar boy for a long time. And then I went to college and became a born-again Christian in my spring semester. I attended a Bible study. I was really compelled by it. I had probably questioned the previous 6 months. Ended up going to a little Bible church on the Ohio State campus that was heavily involved in college ministry. For the next 10 years, I was pretty much all in. I was at one point in school, I saw my purpose of going to school that God had brought me there to witness to other individuals and study the Bible with them. I had probably 10 Bible studies going on a week for a while.
Jesus.
Was very, very passionate about it. Had a lot of students who I'd brought into the church who are near and dear to me. There's a lot of them are still my friends that we still correspond. A lot of them I still get into really good discussions with. I pretty much saw my education became less about going to school to learn my craft and more about bringing the gospel to individuals, and wanted actually to go down the path of being a missionary.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of I think the long-term plan in the back of my mind. I moved out to the Bay Area to work for DreamWorks after my senior year. I had kind of two choices to either stay in Columbus and work for internally in the graphics department for a large company that was doing kind of internal promotions type stuff, or I could go off and do CG animation on this film called Ants. And I chose the latter, and probably for the next 4 or 5 years was heavily involved there, and ended up that probably 13, 14 years ago, ended up over a period of 6 months to a year going down a path that led me to abandon my beliefs that those things I had held as strong convictions were true, and eventually settled on atheism, and have been that way since. Still heavily involved in up until a year ago when my daughter took my Bible to college with her. I was reading the Bible as much as ever. I'm very much into I enjoy developing my knowledge of Scripture, of reading Jewish histories. I'm kind of have a bit of a historical nut freak in me. I like the Civil War and World War II, and I have bookshelves filled with volumes on those subjects. So
You remind me of one of my friends. Yeah,
this kind of falls into a lot of that for me. As well, I always enjoy discussing philosophy and discussing belief, and so that never really left me. I'd say it's much more active the last 7 or 8 years. So, but I was a Calvinist as well, which I know that that's a People find that interesting for various reasons. Arminians find that interesting, and Calvinists find that interesting, and
Mm-hmm.
both chat to me for different reasons. So,
Yeah, I think you would be the thing where Johnny or whoever would say, "See, it was the Calvinism that led you away to go to atheism."
right, yeah, I think that's what everybody's or at least the Arminians are trying to get at that.
Well, what would
So,
you say?
oh
So
yeah,
you need to speak for yourself, so you can speak for yourself, anyways.
sure. I think I had written to you about this before, but I hadn't really thought about it too much up to that point. But I guess the way that I would think about it is, if I was to go back today, I'd still be a Calvinist. I can't get around, given God's the qualities I believe God has. That to me is, there's a lot of scripture that reinforces it. There's a lot of theological reasons that I feel support it, but as well, just in terms of God's characteristics and being omniscient, omnipotent, being a first mover, being fully aware. I don't have it's not coherent to me to think of him otherwise. And so I'd still kind of fall into that. I think that makes it, number one, that makes it a little easy in that the problem is on me and my understanding, right? God is the way God is, and the difficulty is in my understanding why does that not make sense to me, right? Or why do certain situations make that difficult to reconcile? And that may be a mystery, right? You have to be okay with the fact that you may not understand it all, or that it's all to God's glory, and that includes things that may seem counter to that, or from your own perspective, but you don't have kind of the bigger picture. In terms of my falling away, I would say that, well, I don't think it was ingredient, number one, because I think it would have happened if I had been of a different persuasion. But I would say that I could see a case for a non-Calvinist, like an Arminian position, making it feels like you're trying to demarcate your God a little bit more, rather than taking him where he is. You're trying to figure out him, and I think that allows it to be a little more pliable or malleable, such that when you encounter issues, you can go, well, that must not be in God's nature then. So I can kind of portion this off. And I'm not saying that all of them do that. I think that some of them are fairly rigorous in how they develop their belief, but I could see that some of them who are less rigorous could end up with something that fits what they want to believe, rather than what they would come to as being true. So in that case, I think that Calvinism could be a last stop, or it could be, I don't like that term so much, but could be you're between a rock and a hard place. You don't have the wiggle room to change your conception and have a good, have that sit well with you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's actually one guy that I've heard of, Slavoj. He's a Russian philosopher, Slavoj Zizek. And there was a video of him, or a lecture, because this guy is a materialist and all that, and he's got approaches to other forms in philosophy. But one of the things that he touches on when it comes to Christianity, he always gets this that he always has this fascination with the Calvinist concept of it, as in he looks into it and sees what it's all about. And there's apparently a video lecture, part of a lecture that he did, and it's entitled "Calvinism is Christianity at its Purest." So I don't know, you were explaining all that earlier, but would you agree or disagree with Slavoj's approach?
Well, because my perspective's probably changed on this a little bit. I would say that were I to return to believing the core doctrines and adopt belief again, then I would agree with that statement. But I think I've appreciated as I've gotten older that what seems natural to me, or seems those things which seem intuitive, or which make sense to me, I'm less sure of those actually being the purest way to take it anymore. So I could imagine there's probably some pretty persuasive people who can make a case for it being otherwise, and simply because my shoes are a little different, it doesn't, or maybe it's that my feet are a little different, so those shoes don't fit quite as nicely on me, but for them it's pretty snug. And maybe it's just the difference in that kind of base fit for those things. For me, it does make sense. Like when I lay out all of the criteria, all of the things I see being God's properties, and when I look at Scripture, it seems to support that. But I think there are places where it does get tricky, and it's a little tough. One thing I find interesting along those lines is, when I took on faith in 91, and went to about 2001. And there was no broad internet dialogue back then. You had like IRC in the late 90s.
And you had Nirvana.
And we had Nirvana. We had Pearl Jam. We had some really good music coming out. We had some really awful music that was right on its heels. So and there wasn't, when I come onto Google Plus and I see the Arminian Calvinist debates and discussions and criticisms, and some of it can get quite nasty or get quite aggressive.
I agree.
That wasn't because you didn't have the open airing of views. I didn't see that type of conflict. So when I was taking on faith and when I was taking on Calvinism, it was very non-controversial to me. I knew that there were some theologians who subscribed to it. There were, church fathers. There were there was a lot of the main institutions, even though the believers themselves believed that it would have found such a deterministic notion off-putting. The churches they actually went to in their doctrine and in their core principles of faith actually subscribed to it, unbeknownst to them. And so I guess my point is that in the great debate online now, you have this big split, but I didn't have any exposure to that. And what's interesting to me is coming to it, atheists will hear from all Christians that when an atheist makes or a non-Christian makes a argument that your conception of God is monstrous, or is or they throw in some issue. I have an issue with such an argument, because the truth is the truth, no matter how well it sits with me, right? Mm-hmm. So I actually find it. I actually sympathize with the Christians who tell the atheists, look at just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not true. That's not a reason to not believe it. But the interesting thing is, half of those Christians are Arminians who will say who will turn around and have the Calvinists saying the same thing to them. They'll say, or the Arminians will say, your notion of God is monstrous. I couldn't believe that. But I think that's kind of the same. It's kind of along the same lines of what's true is true, and you need to try to get to the truth. And if it doesn't sit well with you, then that's the problem's on you, not with the conception, right?
Right.
So I found that that to be a really interesting aspect in Google Plus.
Because I'm not only that, I've heard people use the same perspective towards the Arminian God, not just other Calvinists, but even other atheists. Is like, if your God then is just allowing people to have free will and just allowing them to do whatever they want, but he wants to save them so that they don't go to hell, why doesn't he just then interfere with the free will and then just get them out of the whole situation? Doesn't sound loving if he's just going to let them roll and play in the fire. And at least with the Calvinists, they, in my view, I think they offer a justified view of what the whole deal is. The idea of God having a plan behind it. There's a reason behind everything. But with certain aspects of the Arminian perspective to allow the concept of free will, it's just, God can see everything in the future, and he's just going to watch you have your free will and your enjoyment and watch the movie that he knows the ending to, kind of perspective. There's a very good illustration that I've seen for three of the viewpoints in this: Calvinism, Arminianism, and then open theism. Which, have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, that's a really incoherent concept to me.
Mm-hmm. The guy.
I have a really hard time understanding how God opts out of his, by his own volition, can opt out of knowing. I don't know where that. If we explored that, I wouldn't even know at what point God could. Can God foresee that he's going to? It's a little like, I liken it to, I'll be recording a football game on TV or something that I had to go out and I couldn't watch it. But I come back and I need to turn the TV on, but I know it's recording the game, but I don't want to see it in progress. So I have to kind of look away and try to turn it on and pause the game and function, operate the TV while this game is sitting there with the score. And inevitably my eyes will just go right to the score and I'll ruin it for myself, right? Imagine that if you're an all-knowing being going, okay, ready to lay out creation now. Or you would actually eternally have known that you were going to, by your own volition, prevent yourself from knowing what the consequence of your actions were going to be. That's a really bizarre notion. I'm sorry, you were saying.
Oh, that's cool. You did bring up a analogy that Kent Hovind used. He used the football game recording analogy.
Oh, really?
When he was discussing this topic.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
He says, I disagree with both Calvinism and Arminianism. They both have some strong points, but then they both have some very weak things. It's like this. I am recording a football game. I know how the football game is going to turn out, and I can go fast forward, I can rewind, and I can play it. And I may have seen the game already, but then the person next to me, he hasn't seen it. So he doesn't know what's coming, even though I do.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the analogy.
Look at that. No, I find it funny that I, to some degree, shared a analogy with Kent Hovind. It's kind of funny.
The other rare thing we'd probably share with him, he's not a flat earther or a geocentric person either.
Who, Kent Hovind isn't?
Yeah,
he's not a flat earther. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people want him to be, but he's saying that he finds the position that the Earth is a sphere and that the Earth revolves in the heliocentric model, even though a lot of people, including the guy that got him well known with the prison phone calls, they believe the Earth is flat and believes it's geocentric, and they really desperately want Kent Hovind to come to their point of view.
The interesting thing is that it feels like to me that you have some fairly straightforward empirical tests you can do right here on Earth to determine the spheroid nature of it, which it's really bizarre to me then that people don't have to rely on NASA for this information. You can figure out for yourself whether the Earth is round or not. There's I can at least think of 3 or 4 things off the top of my head that you could actually perform to actually determine that. So it's the whole thing's a little bizarre to me. So more than a little.
Right. So are there any atheists that you partially dislike or disagree with that you've encountered through?
On which, on any topic?
On any topic, or on YouTube or on Google, or even in real life, or maybe like a celebrity of some sort. Are there any atheists that you personally dislike? Because I know I usually ask this to a couple of people, and they at least manage to get 1 or 2 names out.
Oh, I have. I don't know that dislike's a strong word.
I thought it was hate.
Well, hate's a strong word too.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't really. I'm not. there's not a lot of people in my life who there are people who I don't like spending time with, but certainly I can't think of anyone I hate, but there are certainly so I guess I would say there are individuals who make arguments that I don't respect their positions who are atheists. So, for instance, a typical example is Richard Dawkins, right? And so I think Richard Dawkins is fine when he's talking about biology, but when he starts talking about Christian theology, I tend to kind of that I don't think he does well there. I don't think Hitchens ever did well there. I think someone like Matt Dillahunty, who has the background, can actually speak to Christian theology.
Exactly.
And I think he's much more rounded than the others. I think to some degree that falls a little bit out of having that experience. I don't know that Richard Dawkins has had the experiences in his life which would give him a sympathetic ear to Christian theology or the understanding of it. I don't think it's the type of thing you can read about necessarily to really understand when another individual is talking, what they're meaning. It would be like if I was trying to talk about Hinduism. I would do a terrible job. No matter, I could really study it and actually dig in, but if I didn't ever believe it, then there would be a very different experience from someone who had, in terms of being able to speak to it. So I don't fault them. I just think they kind of wander over the edge a little bit. Aaron Raw is someone who I respect in some ways. I think he's been a more recent topic of discussion in terms of his positions on base axioms, and that we have certain assumptions we're working on. He refutes the idea that these are taken on faith. He's very protective of that word, or defensive, I guess, about that word. He has a kind of an allergy to it. I don't think those are things we should hide from. So I disagree with him strongly on it. There are members in the Google Plus community who aren't moral realists. I'm a moral realist. I don't. There are subjectivists who I disagree with strongly on their moral notions. I tend to be a little bit of, in much the same way, Hitchens was not pro-choice in the sense of a full condoning of or allowance of abortion. He actually spoke up on. I don't know if it went all the way to conception, but he was certainly for the last 2 trimesters against abortion. I tend to be more sympathetic to that just from where my beliefs about moral rights and when something's a person, I tend to have views that are in contrast and against what other atheists or liberal atheists might have come to. But a lot of this is because these positions are derived not from our atheism, but from other beliefs that we have. So people have atheists tend to have a broad mix of beliefs. I don't actually think that's that different from Christians, because I think you have Armenians and Calvinists who see things very differently and are deriving positions based on different portions of scripture or different intuitions or different philosophies that they subscribe to. And so I have differences from other atheists that where I don't actually appreciate their arguments, or I think that their position is not a strong one. But yeah, so yeah, I definitely have quite a few who I would say I disagree with. But there are some. I'd say that there are some in Google Plus who I wouldn't. I don't appreciate their style of discourse, or that I feel like they're not respectful to those whom they're talking to, and I wouldn't carry. I probably wouldn't be. I probably could get along with them in a chat, but were someone to come in who they would disagree with, I might take issue with the way they treat that individual. So, so it's not. I definitely see complaints from Christians about individuals in the community, and I actually can sympathize with some of those complaints. I don't think people are terribly civil sometimes. Ironically, somehow forgetting that they too held false beliefs at one point, or beliefs that other people consider to be false, and are thankful that they have moved out of those positions. Ironically, when they're interacting with people now who they feel have beliefs that are not true, they're completely disrespectful to them as if they never held those positions themselves. So, yeah.
One of the people that I definitely don't have that much respect for, or he's probably one of the most people I dislike in the atheist community concerning, the interactive and the video kinds that we're in. Dusty Smith, otherwise known as Cult of Dusty.
Yeah, I saw. Did you post? You posted a meme in the last day or two, right?
Yeah, this one.
There
right
it is.
here.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I don't actually, I haven't crossed paths with Dusty, although you said he's off now, off YouTube or something.
Yeah, he made a video called "If You're a Muslim, You're Retarded," and he explains several reasons why he believes that. And apparently, he was given a ban notice because someone said it was offensive and partially racist on his part, and they wanted his account removed. So he went on someone else's channel and made a farewell address video and said he was leaving, but he wasn't upset with YouTube or anything because it got him where he was and all that kind of stuff. But even then, I've seen some of the stuff he's made, and then I noticed that shirt of his, "Keep calm and use logic." So, first off, he's never calm in his videos. You can tell that he yells like crazy. So that's one thing he fails at. And then the second is logic, which I've seen people, some guy named Positively Godless,
Right.
he responded to a video that I shared. It was one of this woman. She's a Catholic Christian woman that has a master's in theology, and she responds to Dusty's video of him claiming that the Bible treats women like dog crap, and she's refuting him at every single stopping point with verses and theological points that she brings up, that women are put on a pedestal. It's like men are to love the women like Christ loves his bride, the church, that they would even die for the women. So it puts them on a pretty big pedestal for the men to honor their wives so much that they would give their lives up for them. She said, "That doesn't make me look like dog crap. That makes me feel pretty valuable if it's going to have to take a life to defend me there." So it just goes on and on and on. And she even mentions that, because have you ever heard that verse where it's, what was it? I command the woman to be silent in the church or whatever?
Yes, yeah.
She brings that up, and then he brings it up, and then she counters with, it's saying, where the context is, it's referring to the pagan worship where only women were in authority at that point. And it was mainly because it was a women goddess that they were worshiping. And the other thing was also that there was a woman teacher, but it was only when they were with a man, the husband, that they were preaching. Priscilla and Aquila was these two people that they became Christians, and that they followed the Apostle Paul. Whenever they did their travels, Paul left them in a certain area and then went on. And then later on,
this is like in first or second Timothy, one of those two.
No, I believe it was in Acts when.
Oh! I thought you were talking. I meant the women should not speak up.
Yeah, that one is in First Timothy. Yeah.
Okay.
But the story is in Acts, and at some point later, then a guy's professing to be Christian. He's wanting to seek truth, and then to help sharpen the person's understanding, Priscilla and Aquila take the person in, and then they start teaching this person. So not only did the man help teach, but the other person, the woman, also did the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then these two even started their own church, and they preached together. So it doesn't really say women aren't allowed to preach. It's just that women aren't able to start their own things on their own and have like control over them, preaching over the men. Because I see there's people like Beth Moore and the new girl that other woman that's in that movie War Room. They both go out and they do sermons and preach, but they're only addressed in a room full of women, which is pretty awesome too, because I see the energy these women have, and it's fantastic, especially Beth Moore, because she's Southern, and well, we Southern people are very crazy down here. We know how to put on a show.
So you were saying that this content was in Dusty was criticizing it in this, and you brought up Positively Godless. I was confused of who was speaking to what.
Well, Dusty was basically saying he was making his own video, and then this woman was commenting, and the video where it shows the woman commenting on what Dusty said, Positively Godless said that he liked the video and that the woman was basically spanking him, pounding him in every single point. He was loving it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are some people that don't like Dusty, and there's a good reason for that. But one thing we need to keep in mind is that I don't personally think he's doing it for the discussion of religion and all that stuff. I think he's doing it for entertainment.
Sure. Yeah.
Some of the stuff he's just saying is just trying to get some laughs. But I think I can actually have a conversation with, and we can discuss religion and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there are people. Where was it? There was a discussion about this a week or two ago. I'm sure it happens periodically, where oh, you know what it was? It was there's a guy who I like quite a bit, TJ Downing, had posted his frustration over the way that some of the atheists, he himself is an atheist, and he was expressing some frustration over how other atheists approach their interactions on Google Plus. And what we ended up talking about a bit was that people come for different reasons, right? There are some people for whom this is sport, right? They're coming because this is ponage for them. They get some gratification. It's like going into Warcraft and doing PvP or something for them. They enjoy the sport of it. But there are others who are more interested in the dialogue and looking to get further understanding. There are people who approach both of those things at different times, and find multiple uses out of the Google Plus community. So a lot of it is that you have people with multiple, people with different backgrounds coming for different reasons, and then people with different reasons interacting. And so you have people getting trounced who are trying to make fair and honest points. Their every slip up is criticized. It was interesting. There's an individual that I won't name who routinely gets trounced by the atheists on Google Plus, and part of it's because he's honestly naive and ignorant on a lot of issues because of his background in terms of education. He was a blue collar worker, and he actually told me this. I'm not stereotyping him. He said he was an auto worker who he confided this in me, and confessing this, that he himself feels unable to speak to many of the issues, but he wants to engage in the discussion. And so when he does, he comes across as a troll, but he's not looking to troll. He realizes many times he's often wrong, or he doesn't have the complete, all the information that he needs to be able to speak to something, but he still wants to participate. And there's not a lot of grace on either side, I would say, for those who are entering in to the discussion, not having necessarily maybe prepared themselves, or not necessarily having delved into the issue quite as deeply as some would like. And when they open their mouths, inevitably they're going to say things that aren't very well thought out or have misinformation in them, and they get utterly destroyed. And so I think what happens is what I suspect happens is either people leave very quickly, they realize this isn't for them, or you get people who stick it out, who double down and say preposterous things over and over and over again, and you get individuals who are so dug in. Yeah.
By the way, I would like to ask, if you want to, we can if you want, we got a lot of people that are wanting the link, and I guess are watching. We got like 7 people watching us. I'm like, wow, you are one popular person, Mr.
Oh,
Bert.
I don't think so.
Right. But I mean, if you want, I can send the link out if you would like to have some people join in on this.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah, for
sure.
sure. Yeah,
Solely on you, man. All right.
sure. Yeah.
All right, everyone, if you check, because apparently YouTube is becoming idiotic with its no comment system. The link is in the, you can find it on the on the Christian Anarchist Google Plus page and on the event. So if you want in, just click on that link and join me and Bert as we continue talking about religion, morality, and philosophy, and all other kinds of stuff too. So here's my other question, Bert. Do you think that Christianity or religion, or well, let's focus on Christianity for the moment right now. Do you think it offers any good or benefits to society with its particular beliefs, what we can find in the Bible, and also with certain Christian thinkers and theologians themselves?
Yeah, I think so. Just broadly about religion in general, I think to some degree we've developed alongside of it. Um, the And so I don't know that I'm prepared for a world without religion tomorrow, right? So I feel like there is um, a uh, I believe that there's a uh, it gives a quick and dirty structure, or maybe quick and dirty is not the term I'm looking for there. It gives a structure to society where people can find common ground, can find a shared system to operate under. And I don't mean to say that this was willfully contrived that way so as to manipulate people. I don't know that it was that conscious, but I think it kind of developed along those lines. And so I think there's benefit to society, but I think it brings detriment as well. I think it would be better if we could be um, a little more rooted in empirical investigation. I think we would come to a richer, more firm foundation for our societies. But I don't know that everyone's prepared for that endeavor. I think that the reason why it gives that the reason why that structure works so well in terms of it giving form solid rules and understanding, kind of a comprehensive framework, is that people can get up and running in society very quickly. You don't have people scattering, trying to figure things out and developing potentially dangerous beliefs. If you can get them to all to adhere along a certain a group of beliefs, a framework, I think that's conducive to a little bit of stability, depending on the beliefs. But I think generally those beliefs tend to be stable beliefs that stabilize societies. So I think that that's not something. The thought of having no religions tomorrow is one that I'm not sure that I think we're ready for. It takes a lot of work, honestly. When I became an atheist, I still wanted to have Christianity gave me an entire framework. When I adopted Christianity, I tossed my entire worldview and took on a whole new one. When I chose to be an atheist, that was a single belief that had changed, but it impacted an entire frame. But the framework was jettisoned, but I still had to operate and function and understand what I meant when something was moral, or when I meant that we were going to that I was going to have children and that I was going to raise them and that I wanted them to be good people, and why did I want that? And so all of a sudden my work's cut out for me in terms of fleshing out what it is I believe about the rest. My whole metaphysical outlook had to be kind of fleshed out. And I think religion provides a codified, structured framework that gives you a lot of those answers. And I think to some degree that there's some benefit for people who may not be up to the challenge of taking that endeavor on themselves. So, that's not to that's I don't want to be overly cynical about people, but I think that there's some truth to that. In terms of Christianity specifically, I think that you can find. benefit in in terms of social benefit. Again, along the same lines of what I was talking about in terms of giving some structure, but I think as well you have active participation in charities and in outreach to individuals, building homes for communities. So it's not, there's plenty of good there. It's my belief that those things can be derived from other outside of that context, but that context definitely brings those things. And I think I enjoy the dialogue I have with Christians. I think it's edifying for me. I think it enriches me, and it gives me the fact that there are people who disagree with me on very core beliefs, sharpens my own reasoning and helps me reform my own beliefs. So there's benefit from disagreement. So yeah, so I'd say that that's a fairly general answer, but I think there's a lot of general good from it.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Right. So one of the core doctrines that Christians hold to is the concept of the original sin, that man is fallen due to what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden. And because people are, filthy, and they can't, in the sense of filth, when I say filthy, I mean that they can't do anything that's pleasing to God, because we can try it, no matter how hard we try, we end up failing, as in we're not good enough in a sense. But then comes Jesus, that he pays the price for our sins, that we, get redeemed. So some people have problems with the first half, then some people think that human sacrifice and cannibalism is mentioned in the second half of it. Would you, I don't know, as an atheist, would you have any problems with these different perspectives of the core doctrine of Christianity involving original sin and the atonement?
Yeah, I'll speak to the atonement first, because I think I can kind of get that one out of the way. It never really gave me pause. There are individuals who have a really strong repudiation of the notion that another individual can atone for someone else's crime, so as to absolve them of it, or to have taken on the burden of responsibility onto themselves. And I think that's where they have trouble, where they see the individual still having responsibility, which I think the Christian would affirm that the sinner is still responsible for the act, but that the associated justice for that act is shifted off to someone else. I think that they have that really gives some people pause, and they really get hung up on that. I've never really given that enough thought to get hung up on it. If I dug into it and really rigorously vetted it in terms of what the meaning is to those words, and I might have some of the same objection, but I haven't. But it doesn't strike me as something that is not a potential state of affairs. So there could have been a case that God would have done this. I think that it hasn't struck me that way. And it might be an interesting exercise for me to think about it more, but it's not been something that's been a big bug in my hat, as it were, in regards to Christianity. I would say that the first thing in terms of original sin is very much ingredient to my falling away from the faith. I came to see humans as behaving and having never had a perfect nature. I don't even know. I have so many issues with seeing I believed in a young earth, and I think I believed in a young earth. It's hard for me to recall. I never had to really a lot of discussion with it, but as far as I can recall, I believed in a young earth, and I certainly believed in a literal Adam and Eve, and that they had a perfect state from which they fell, that brought death into the world, and that creation radically changed at that point. That was actually the line of thinking, exploring that and thinking about human behavior in that context. I no longer believed in a prior perfect state. And that is what actually did in for me the redemption and the atoning work of Christ. I no longer saw that as I think for me, it couldn't be figurative. It had to be a distinct moment and a moment of redemption. And that I was never able to take an allegorical or a poetic interpretation of the first act without also saying, well, why couldn't the second act also be figurative or poetic? Like, that didn't make any sense to me. There are people who hold those positions. I think I took it as I read it, and it seemed to me that anyone who takes that figurative view is going to have problems eventually, because you have the flood on the heels of that. You have Abraham and the Tower of Babel, and you have all the way through to Moses. And so at which point are you going to stop calling it poetic figurative? Is it right after the genealogies, in which case you believe in a global flood that I think there's as many issues for that as a literal Adam and Eve. So long story short, and I got a little off track there. The nature of man was foundational to kind of giving me real pause and real issues with Christianity.
And I would like to say welcome to both guests that have just joined on. Both are familiar with. One, his name begins with a K, and then the last name is just the letter K. It is Carlton.
Hey! Thank you.
And
How's it going today, guys?
it's going pretty good. I see you're still hiding behind the computer screen.
Still hiding behind there. It's turned into quite this thing on Blab. I've been over on Blab now. I found another guy. His cam's behind the screen too, except it's the other way. You can only see half his face sliced vertically instead of horizontally, so you can see him on the side. So we think we should do a hangout together. We don't have a title for it yet, but it looks funny as hell when we're on there together.
You guys can split screen across the horizontal.
Yeah,
that would be great.
And then we have someone known as Double A, otherwise known as Absolute Atheism. Hopefully that he has had problems with the audio at times, and I think it's because Microsoft has become a bit of an idiot when it comes to upgrading the system and interfering. So let's see how it works. Absolute, you there?
Yeah, hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hello.
All right. So, since we have some guests in here, and they're probably doing it because of either me or Bert, I'm going to just let it be about Bert for the moment. So does anyone have a thing they want to ask me or Bert?
a thing for you and Bert. I have a question for you. This, if it's okay. This was a conversation that we had on Blab the other day, and I found that I was unprepared with what would be a really good answer, and I've done a little reading since then to try and come up with one, but I'd be interested in hearing where somebody else is on this. The question was basically, how do you, what criteria do you use to distinguish supernatural from natural? How do you go about doing that? Do things change categories? Are they always in the same category? And how do you go about deciding what goes where?
Do you want to take that one, Bert?
Sure. For myself, it reminds me of Hume and his discussion about miracles in terms of I would take it to be something that is foreign to, so I have standard inferences I've drawn as I've gone about my life. I've formed a certain understanding of the world, and where I were to encounter something so contrary to my experience, such that it led me to believe that there was some type of, it would have to be complex enough to involve some intelligence or something inexplicable, then technically I would see it as, I think a lot of atheists want to argue that all of it would be natural, that whatever's happening is happening in the natural world. But I'm okay with giving that a category of supernatural, which is beyond the what I would expect in terms of an experience, and that Hume said that it would need to be more likely that that the testimony would have to be so solid that it would be more likely that the event happened than that people were deceived or had experienced a delusion of some sort, or either deceived or are deceiving. For me, I actually have I had an experience when I was like 20 where I thought that God spoke to me in my head and he gave me a name. And I've said to all of my friends since I've been an atheist that if they can tell me that name, that will give me some that will at least spark in me a reason why I may believe that there's an immaterial reality or a immaterial mind that has access to my thoughts and can deliver that to someone else, or has that was a private moment for me, and that there's something outside of my awareness that has access to that. Now, a lot of people will say like that could be an alien, right? That has developed some type of technology. But for myself, because I put it in the framework of reinforcing belief, and in terms of giving me a reason to believe that that my metaphysical outlook is wrong, is that there's another aspect to reality that I'm unaware of, that I currently don't believe. That would give me a reason to believe it, and I would associate that with something that would be supernatural, would be beyond my natural experience. But it's a really tricky question in terms of what then qualifies for that.
I saw. Here's yeah. Let me backtrack a little bit. When I got asked, I didn't really have a go-to answer, and the person sort of posited or put forth this notion of, well, what if it's just, he did a dictionary definition. He says, well, okay, it says it's something that we don't have an explanation for. And to me, that was sort of unsatisfying, because clearly we discover things all the time for which we don't have an answer.
Wait, what was the definition?
This is basically something that's beyond the reach of science in terms of being able to explain its existence or its appearance.
And what was this word that was being defined?
Supernatural.
Mm.
Yeah, and so I didn't like that, because we discover things all the time and we don't have an explanation for it. We find one, but that doesn't, in my mind, qualify it to be supernatural before then just pop back into the natural world now that I can give it a definition. I went and I found, I'll put a link here. I went and I found this. It was a great article, I thought, that somebody wrote trying to define this same thing. And he basically comes up with 5 criteria, each of which on its own sort of has some holes in it, some things slip through, and so he kind of tries to seal that with the next 2 or 3 or 4. And if you, somewhere down the bottom of the article, he actually kind of has a little side by side. But he basically says, okay, and depending on which one we're looking at here, so let's say supernatural, he says, okay, it needs to be non-physical, he says, or supervenient upon the non-physical. Then he says, 2, it has to be irregular in terms of the uniformity of nature, that it doesn't follow the laws of nature as we understand it. He says then causality, is it causally opened or closed? Is this something that was initiated by something outside of our reality that we can't track to? And I thought, and then the more interesting one here is 4. He says it has to be irreducibly mental. And he talks about this in terms of, he says, whenever we talk about the supernatural, and this is the kind of part I've been thinking about, he says we don't ever talk about things as being supernatural. We are always talking about a disembodied brain of some sort, a consciousness, something that has intent. We don't talk about a supernatural calculator or a supernatural spoon. It always seems to be a mind state. And so he says, I hope I'm doing this justice. And he says, so in the natural world, he says, even our consciousness, even though it is not physical per se, it is contingent or supervenient upon the physical. So it is an emergent property, and we recognize that its existence or its state is dependent on its physical underpinnings. So he's saying that with the supernatural, it's irreducibly mental. So that, and I'm quoting him here, so it's not my language, but he says mental states that are ontologically basic. So there is no underlying physicality to this consciousness. It simply is. It's the base level. And
Wait,
then
he's talking about, but sorry, that last bit threw me. He's talking about the consciousness from which this miracle derives, or this supernatural action derives.
He's talking about the consciousness itself. So if we posit God, he would say that God's being, awareness, whatever, God's consciousness is not dependent on a physical thing.
So okay, so I guess I got confused here. When you were talking about supernatural, you weren't talking about supernatural phenomena. You're talking about the ontology of the supernatural in terms of, like, if there was God, that there would be his necessary criteria for his ontology, or I'm sorry, I was reading as we were going along, and I think I lost track of the discussion here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think what he is saying here is that when we talk about things that are supernatural, we are always talking about the notion of a consciousness, and he's saying that the difference between that consciousness, the supernatural consciousness, and the consciousness that we experience as human beings, is that our consciousness is dependent on the physicality of our brain. Whereas for something to qualify as supernatural, it would have to be a consciousness which is irreducible, that it is not dependent on anything else for its existence. It simply is a disembodied, I don't know quite the right word that he's talking about. State.
Yeah, it would have to be out of our current metaphysical understanding. Even if you were to posit other dimensions or whatever, they would still have a physical a physicality to them, right? But when you're well, if they were, say, like I'm thinking along the lines of string theory. So if within our understanding we're experiencing 4 dimensions, and there are actually 10, and there are, and in some way there is a notion of consciousness at that 10th dimension, and it or in those 10 dimensions, and that, let's say, that somehow interacted with us in our 4. I would not necessarily call that a supernatural entity. I would think of something as a mind outside of matter, essentially. It would be supernatural.
Yes. So he's sort of adding these categories together. So non-physicality would already be there.
So how about in terms of, if we were talking about a supernatural in terms of an occurrence or a miracle, as you were talking about it, I guess I realized that the phenomena would have to be personal to me. It would have to have some connection to, like, there's a common one that said that if you looked at into a set of molecules or cells, and you or atoms, and you found the genealogies written on them or something, that would then be an indication of the supernatural. I would agree with something like that, because it's taking something from your conscious experience on the level of being a human, and then somehow this data managed to get to some place I would never expect to see it. And would suggest some purposive mind or action.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and that's his. I'm sorry, and that's his fifth criteria is this notion which he calls teleological, that to be supernatural there has to be intent or a desire to do something, as opposed to natural events which are basically random. They're not purposeful. Or planned, whereas supernatural ones are. But I'm curious to answer, or to kind of talk about, if I have some dominoes in front of me, and I have 5 dominoes, okay, and they're close enough so when they fall over they all go, right? If I push the first domino with a pen, and I sit here and I observe the dominoes fall over, nobody would think that was supernatural at all. If I put the dominoes back up, and God, assuming he exists, simply makes the first domino fall over. In other words, there's no cause here that I can associate with that action. And the first domino falls over, and then, of course, they all go. When I'm observing that, have I seen anything supernatural, or have I only seen, and this is kind of where I think where I'm at, have I only seen still a natural event for which I don't have an explicative cause? I can't assign a cause to it. That's the piece that is supernatural, but clearly the part that I witnessed seems to be perfectly natural. The dominoes are still falling over, according to the laws of physics. It's simply that first one that did so without any rhyme or reason or any causality that's in my reality. I'm trying to figure out how to draw that line exactly.
Well, there's kind of there's kind of two things there. Is that first is that there's the epistemic question in terms of whether you could infer that you had seen a miracle then, right? Because it's more likely that you're misapprehending or you're not understanding something about reality than it is that something happened. You would be find more warrant to believe that than that something defied natural the natural the consistency that we've come to rely on is very consistent. We rely on it every day. In every action, we're relying on this consistency of nature. And now you've experienced something that is different from the norm. But in the case of a falling domino, if that domino were to move, there's a number of reasons why you could think that it would move without your interaction, without it being supernatural, and that you had just simply not understood that or not apprehended what the actual cause was, right?
Okay.
So there's kind of that level, and then the other level I saw in terms of what you're talking about is that if God did move that, is God's action there a supernatural event, right?
Okay.
All right. So I would like to move on. I noticed that Absolute hasn't said anything, but I'm not gonna lie. This was an interesting topic. I thank you, Carlton, for it.
No problem, sir.
They'll thank you.
You don't have to stop things on my account. It's okay. This is great.
We'll probably get back to it too, because it was that intriguing. But okay.
Because I was just about to jump onto your side of the defense here. I was about to be a Christian here for a second with my next question. So
don't let me stop your conversion.
Well, no, I don't want a Christian who wants to change topics, so we'll change topic. We'll come back to it at some point.
It was predestined for conversion, anyways. So
the domino was predestined to fall.
The domino was predestined to fall.
Well, no, I was just, if you can indulge me just for the last piece, okay. Because I think this is, I think this is not an illegitimate question that theists would ask, and that is, when you talk about which is more likely that God would intervene or a supernatural event would have transpired, or that there would have been something of which I'm unaware, it's more likely that the laws of nature would be maintained, so to speak, than abrogated at that point. But isn't that the exact problem that Hume had? That you cannot infer the laws of nature simply because from past events. That past events do not in any way guarantee, except through induction, that we will see the same laws, that they won't change in the very next moment. Simply because gravity has worked the same way in human lifespan is not to infer that it won't change in the next 2 minutes.
Right.
And so is there a case to be made statistically, or when you say that which is more likely that the laws of nature would be violated or that they would continue and I simply misread what I saw?
Well, I think that the difficulty is that it's I think you're right in that Hume obviously has the problem of induction that he doesn't introduce, but he exposes or talks. He deals with. But then on the other hand, he's talking about inference to the best explanation in terms of when confronted with a miracle, whether it's more likely to believe that someone was deceived or is deceiving than it actually took place. So there's kind of two sides to the coin, a little bit there. I guess what I would say is, how could you? It's a question of how you could know, right? So what would be the reason for preferring the taking it on as a miracle over taking it on something that you have more experiences with, right? Which is people being mistaken or people being having a mental breakdown, right? My father suffered Alzheimer's, and he had delusions of events that weren't actually taking place. Were I to experience those same delusions later in my life, is it the case? I wouldn't be in a position to adjudicate the matter, but my inferences would be I would actually be mistaken in that case rather than those things actually taking place. And I think that it's very difficult to find a scenario where the human mind is in such a position to apprehend reality that it can take something that is a one-time occurrence and not have a better reason than that thing occurred. And it's mainly a matter of it's a hard problem, and that's why I think God has to do something for me really compelling to overcome my burden, as it were, because I don't trust my own mind. I feel like I already had those experiences where my inferences, I abandoned my inferences, and I took on a position where I thought that supernatural things were going on. If I was to return to that, I would need. That's why I have that little name test. Is that to me seems so specific, and it solves a major issue for me, which is a mind outside of my own that has access to my thoughts, which is a core thing I need. And so I think it does present a problem for believing miracles and taking those on. But I don't know in which case you would be more warranted to favor it than that you were mistaken.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Does that make sense, Carlton? From my perspective, anyway. Carlton, are you there?
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I had been muted there.
I figured.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense for first level examination. I think my only question would be, suppose we jump through those hoops and we can eliminate anything faulty in terms of our senses or our technology or what have you. Once we have gone through all that and validated that everything is, that we are correctly perceiving what we saw, if we can do that, does it then become more reasonable to say that there was a supernatural interference here, or does this become sort of the rabbit's hole that now that we've evaluated everything that we can evaluate, that now we suspect our evaluation methods, and we keep walking back indefinitely, so we never get to a point where it is more reasonable to think that there's a supernatural?
I personally feel like at some point with enough warrant that I should allow myself to be persuaded to believe it. I don't think I should I think I should be skeptical to a degree, but at the degree that I have enough warrant to believe it, I shouldn't continue to be skeptical of my senses if other people, like if there were 100 people that saw this thing and none of us could explain it, but all of us could give a precise testimony of what had occurred, then I would have to believe that thing occurred at the very least.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't deceived.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Deidre.
She must be away at the moment.
She is muted.
Hey, I'm on my phone, so I had just stepped away from it for a second. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Just want to say hi.
Hey, I can't see side chat, so just to let you know. But yeah, I'm on my phone. I'm listening.
Okay, guys. If we're going to talk about Deidre, do it in the side chat.
Gosh, you're going around. Jesus.
But I kind of agree with you, and I think this is a change in my position over the years. I think in reading that guy's explanation of supernatural versus natural, I think then that given that I would have to say agree that if we are talking about a mind, if we are talking about a teleological mind, one that has intent and purpose, then it seems that we could set up a series of tests, assuming that this being will play along with the tests and comply. It seems like we could then set up a test to determine whether or not there is in fact some type of an intelligence that exists outside of our realm of reality. As long as he can intervene in our reality, and as long as he is willing to play the game with us, so to speak, then I think we can. So that has sort of changed the proposition for me in terms of what evidence would you accept. I think, at least for me now, the problem seems to be that he's unwilling to play the game, which kind of puts me back at square one again.
Well, I kind of look at it like this: that it's fairly known that you cannot test the supernatural because that goes beyond our natural testing abilities. But what we can do is test the effects of the supernatural on the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
If say, a supernatural event happened here on Earth, we should be able to test the effects, the natural effects of the supernatural event. And you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. So if I ask God to knock over my dominoes, and we have 10 people here, and every time somebody asks, God obliges and knocks over the dominoes, and we've eliminated all the other possibilities, especially if it's an intelligent mind, then we should be able to communicate across that divide and establish that there is an intelligent mind there, wherever there is.
So,
exactly.
So the way to test it is ask God to do something like just say, God, knock over the domino, and if it doesn't, and if the domino isn't knocked, then the conclusion is to be followed that there is no God, correct?
No, I think the conundrum then is the one that we have when we talk about answered prayer. It's that I don't know if God it heard me and he decided not to. I don't know if he didn't hear me and he would have if he did. I don't know if there is nobody there and that's why I'm not getting an answer. So I get stuck sort of in this. I have no way to validate unless he's consistent. And unless I can somehow know that he's going to be consistent, I really don't have any way to know to evaluate a one-off.
Yeah, exactly. You can't set up a double-blind test because you can't make God conform to your testing abilities. But what we can do is when an event has happened already, then test the natural world. Say, we'll just take the burning bush, if there was a burning bush, you test the bush to see if it was, burnt. Obviously there would be a whole lot of other factors playing into that, but that's what I'm talking about. Examining the natural effects of the supernatural event.
Well, my case is a one-off case where if Christian Anarchist was to message me right now and say, hey Bert, I got this strong sense that the name that you're looking for is it's not Oscar. That the name you're looking for is this, because I've set up this test because I know actually how specific and unlikely it would be for someone, which is incredibly it would compel me to believe, and if Christian Anarchist was to do that, that would be a one-time event that would warrant some belief from me that something had occurred beyond my understanding. Now, it doesn't lead me to the particular God, but because I'm talking to Christian Anarchist who's a Christian, I would tie those two facts together and at least think that I was on better grounds to go that way than to continue to be skeptical. Because of the specificity and the requirements to fulfill this test, and so for me, I'm wide open. I will have this open for the rest of my life, and it's been years and years now, and I still haven't had it. So, and it feels like to me that that's I get a lot from Christians. Well, you're just asking God to come to you on your terms. But that's the necessary, as far as I can tell, the necessary reason I would need to believe would be something that I am expecting to see were it the case. And so give me something that I would expect to see. that wouldn't be explained by other means. And yes, that is my level. Or God is also in a position to know what it would take for me to believe, and so if he knows of some other means, he can come by that. But yeah.
All right, and I want to get Deidre's perspective on this, but before I do get that, Deidre, are you there?
Yeah. What's up?
You remember Preet?
Yeah.
Found out she's an egalitarian, just like you.
Yeah. So it's Cody.
Interesting. I didn't know that from Cody.
Yeah. Which, as you should be an egalitarian.
Well, we're gonna agree and disagree on things, but hey, I still love you as a sister in Christ.
Oh yeah.
So, what's your 2 cents on this that we're talking about?
I think that I'm not sure if God bestows names upon people. It's like I had this conversation with Bert when I visited him, and Scott was actually listening just now, and he's like, "Oh, I had this conversation with Bert," and I'm not sure if God bestows names upon people like that, but I think Ishmael here is on the track of at least being open, right? Feeling open?
Yeah.
I would say that it
Ishmael?
wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered that God gave me the name. It would have been that God knew that I had interpreted it as that. So if God is knowing my thoughts right now and knowing my discussion with you, he would know what that event was and know what it was that I had thought I had heard, even if he wasn't speaking to me in that moment. So it actually doesn't matter whether I had misperceived it or not at the time. I'm asking for a mental. I'm asking for a mental confirmation or an immaterial confirmation of his existence is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I've seen like David Smalley pray for cheese, and that cheese would just manifest itself onto the table, and they used it, and they all held hands, and they prayed for cheese, and I don't really know if a God that creates the whole universe is going to allow us all to individually pray for cheese and be like, here's the cheese. You know, it seems to me a poor test for us. I don't know. Extremely self-centric.
But aren't all prayers in search of a reason to believe very self-centered? I mean, even the person who doesn't specify cheese to appear, the person who just says, you know, God, I really want to know if you're there. Show me some sign. Give me some evidence of you're there. Maybe even because I want to believe, but I just can't cross that divide without some help. You know, even that type of prayer, it would seem that, you know, God clearly would know what it would take to help that person, and he's either going to give it to him or not. I mean, it seems by definition it would be kind of self-centered. But I think the cheese is not a bad example. I mean, I sort of like it because it's a very simple example. You know, it's something that, you know, would be difficult to explain away should it really happen. I don't think that they were asking for cheese because they were hungry and were too cheap to buy it. So I'm assuming that they were simply asking as sort of evidence that God is there and can do this. I actually, that's sort of one of my problems a little bit, is that it seems that God has given, assuming God's there, it seems that God has provided the requisite experiences for believers to believe, but at the same time has not provided or allowed the requisite experiences for people who don't believe to believe. If he is in control of rolling out the environment, so to speak, and what you experience, and if he clearly knows what is required for you to reach that level of awareness to where you're going to believe, then it seems, even though I'm not a Calvinist, then it seems he has provided or allowed that for certain people. He has to have known that their set of experiences would result in their belief, And he clearly also has to have known that other people have not had what they require in order to believe. So why shouldn't he give them the cheese?
Well, I think it kind of comes in a different order. I think that actually you believe first, and then the faith has to be experienced. So I don't think you usually get the experience first, and then you believe.
What would be my reason for believing anything first? Like, I don't believe Islam first before it's shown to me. I need reasons to believe it, upon which then, and those reasons are the reason that I believe it. I don't believe in reincarnation. I wouldn't say to myself, "Oh, I need to believe reincarnation first, and then I will get some confirmation of it." I feel like I have the way that I form my understanding of the world, and the way that I build what I conclude is the case and is not the case. I have these two areas between what is the case and what isn't the case, and what I believe about those, my propositions concerning those. And when I believe something is the case, it's because I have reasons which contribute to me thinking that it's the case. To say that I should take it on without the reasons and then I will be given the reasons doesn't fit with how I work, how I come to believe things in any other sense. And it would seem to me, because we have such a strong ability to make correlations between things all the time that are wrong. I'll perceive that someone was doing something for a certain reason and learn later that I was actually very mistaken about it. And it was sometimes I'm not giving someone benefit of the doubt, and I'm actually jumping to a conclusion in terms of their motivation, right? We do these things all the time in terms of building coherence. If I was to take on something before having reason to believe it, I have no doubt that if I was really going to try to do that, that I could probably build some coherence, that I could take things in such a way as for it to make sense. And so it's very important for me that my belief be warranted, and that that my confidence in it be matched by the reasons I have for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the best reasoning of why we believe in God. I think getting to a specific God, I think it's a little bit harder.
I think, and I kind of had two questions kind of in that same line that come to mind when we say that we should exercise faith first and then experience the results of that. Crap. I remember one and I forgot the other one. Okay, I think first of all, or actually it was second, that it seems like God would realize that this. Oh, I know what it was. Let me do it in order. First of all, is this notion that I don't know that we can choose our beliefs. I think our beliefs occur as a result of, some prior thought process or experiences. I don't think we can just decide to believe something. But even if we could, to me, it seems like God would recognize immediately that this is disingenuous. In other words, he would be able to recognize that I am saying I believe this, when in fact that belief has not yet been. It is not flowing naturally from what I know or think I know. It is sort of a step of faith. It is sort of a stepping out there and pretending that I believe, but I really don't yet. And I'm not sure why we would reward that type of behavior.
I'll just offer that in terms of so I have a lot of issues with the group testimony of 2,000 years ago, written by anonymous authors, and the textual record isn't great, and so I have difficulty taking that on for myself as a reason for myself to believe that there's occurred over other types of accounts. That there are lots of other accounts that I don't subscribe to, and so while Christianity has a robustness that I enjoy and Scripture has a robustness that I enjoy, there's a bar to me that hasn't been met yet in terms of my warranting confidence in me that that's actually the case. So I have these tests as an honest. They are my honest evaluation of what it would take to actually compel me that I wasn't wrong about it. The irony here is that it's not that I don't trust God, it's that I don't trust the accounts. I'm perfectly willing to, from my own perspective, as far as I can really see in myself, I am willing to take on whatever is true. I've already changed my life radically 3 or 4 times based on my beliefs concerning reality changing. I've changed overnight because I'm earnestly interested in truth. And this is the criteria which I feel would lead me to that conclusion. And like I said, I'm open to a different criteria, but I don't know of any. It would have to be, I'm looking for something personal that compels me that it would have to be something that would be so unusual that it wouldn't be an accident, and that it would be personal and as well immaterial. It would have to be something that gets inside my head, as it were, because I see that as being a very protected set of things that only I know. I haven't shared that experience with anyone else, and that's why that's actually why I gave it as a criteria, is that name that I thought I heard 20-something years ago was a private experience that no one has access to, and so were I hear that again, it would actually give me a strong feeling that I was fundamentally wrong about my understanding of reality. And that's what's being asked here is you're asking to overturn all of my inferences and all of my set of beliefs that I've built out, which I'm willing to do, but that's a high bar, right? That's not something that just back in college I was willing to dump all of that because honestly I hadn't really built out my metaphysical outlook very strongly. I didn't have a lot of firm beliefs that I'd really vetted and really felt strong about. I honestly was a bit of an open book, and so it was very easy for me to go, this makes complete sense, and take it on whole hat and really subscribe to it for 10 years. And then I think I got later in my life and I reconsidered things and I now have a much firmer foundation. It would be a lot more difficult to overturn some of the things that I've come to now, only because I'm thinking about it a lot more. So, but I'm willing to chuck it all. In return, I need something that is of equal weight, and the equal weight for me to abandon all of my beliefs about reality would be something pretty substantial. It'd be something heady. So.
What exactly are your beliefs about reality, Bert?
All right, hold on. We're gonna leave a hold on a second. We're gonna leave a cliffhanger right here because we're gonna end the hangout here. But the recording anyways. But if anyone still wants to come in, like I mentioned, link is open. Just come on in. We're just gonna be talking crazy. You might as well think we're high. So, but yeah. And also a announcement in a few minutes probably an hour or a few minutes from now. Some guy by the name of S. Surreal wants to do a hangout where he wants to talk and ask reformers some things. So I wanted to I'm going to host the thing for him to ask all kinds of questions. It might just be a one-on-one with me.
Careful, you might end up on Scholar Fiction. That's what happened last time I hold a reformer hangout.
Oh boy, I can be great. I'm going to be the next attention whore, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm going to applaud my grandmother in hell. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, not only do I think my grandma's in hell, I also think my brother, my sister, and my doggies in hell. So, but no, I don't think dogs have souls. Anyways, so, till then, catch up on that, and till then, the usual. Shalom Aleichem.